I want to jump right into the video and say that Rogue in Cata feels about the same as it always does. Spam your spec's combo generator and then use the go-to finishing move for that spec, and that hasn't really changed in Cata, especially for combat and assassination rogue. However, we do have a few new utility spells with Recuperate, Combat Readiness, and Smoke Bomb, but these are usually tools for PvP in Cata. But before we jump into the rogue's PvP, I want to talk about PvE specifically. If the sims are correct, and it seems like there's a lot of reputable people making them, like Simonize and the Rogue Discord members, all three specs of Rogue are literally neck and neck, and Assassination comes out at around 100 DPS more than Sub in combat, but these are really negligible when everyone is doing 31k DPS. So the main thing you have to ask yourself is, what do you find the most fun to play? However, before I talk about the specs, I do want to say that I haven't really played Subtlety in PvE in Cata, so I don't really know how much I can talk about it. I will say it is viable, but you probably won't get into a raid group because there is a stigma of Subtlety Rogue being a PvP spec. However, if you're dead set on playing Subtlety, know that you can be just as strong as Combat and Assassination Rogue. But let's talk Assassination. The main difference from Wrath is that you now have to upkeep Rupture and Garrote to get energy ticks and venomous wound damage. Basically, whenever you have a bleed on a target that's poisoned, they take even more damage and give you energy back. It's a very simple concept. But outside of that, it's similar to Wrath Assassination, except now you're just upkeeping Rupture and you're spamming Mutilate and Envenom. The issue I have with this spec is that it's really slow. You'll oftentimes be pulling energy and waiting for the Envenom buff to fall off before using another finishing move. However, if you like a more methodical playstyle with buff upkeep, then Assassination Rogue might be for you. And on the flip side, we have Combat Rogue, which is a lot more fast-paced, and it's a spec that revolves around upkeeping Slice and Dice, using your new ability Revealing Strike before Eviscerate, and making sure to use cooldowns around your buff window. And if you didn't know, Combat Rogue, while usually being the AoE spec, and I mean that loosely because Rogue AoE is usually not that crazy, has a hard time swapping targets because of Bandit's Guile, a new talent that makes you have to use Sinister Strike or Revealing Strike to get a specific buff on one target. What that basically means is that if you're constantly changing targets, you're basically losing up to 30% of your damage because you can't build up Bandit's guys. So overall, combat feels a lot faster with more energy ticks from main gouge and spamming, which I like, but you're also losing a little bit of damage, or not a little bit, a lot of damage whenever you target swap. However, a nice bonus for Combat Rogue is that you can now use Blade Flurry as a toggleable ability, meaning that you're more free to use your AoE ability, Blade Flurry, but you lose around 15% of your energy regen while it's active. So you're more consistent in AoE, but you lose a little bit of energy regen. It's a great trade-off because you're basically doubling your damage whenever you have Blade Flurry active. Okay, so what's the consensus on Rogue in terms of fun in PvE? Personally, I think overall it's a B tier class in terms of fun, but in terms of DPS, it's an A tier class. It just doesn't give me any high moments compared to other classes, and the closest thing you can get to having a really high moment is popping Adrenaline Rush, because that will have you struggling to use all your abilities fast because your energy is filling up so dang quick. So while Adrenaline Rush is active, it does become a very spammy and fun spec, but when it's down, it can be a little bit slower, a little bit more methodical. If you're into that whole super methodical playstyle with nothing too fancy, then Rogue might be for you. I might put Combat Rogue in A tier just because when you have Blade Flurry active and you're cleaving, and when you're able to use all your abilities and you get that energy back, it can flow quite nicely and it can be quite fun in my opinion. But Assassination Rogue is definitely in that B tier just because it plays so slow and it's a bit clunky in AoE. And if I had to say what I would play in Cata, I'd probably main a Combat Rogue unless I had to go Assassination because my guild needs me to get the daggers, and that way there's less loot competition because Assassination Rogue uses daggers. Boom. But let's talk about PvP, where Sub Rogue is really strong. Basically in Cataclysm, you have a toolbox of cooldowns that can be used in any given situation. If you're fighting melee, you can use Cloak of Shadows with the Glyph, Evasion, Combat Readiness, and Disarm, all to be in the mix of an extended fight. And on top of that, you have Recuperate now, which gives you 6% damage reduction when talented, and 5% max HP every 3 seconds, on top of giving you energy back when you're subtlety. So yeah, Cata Rogue is one of the tankiest expansions for Rogue in PvP, on top of Cata already being a bit slower compared to other arena seasons. Going along with all of this, Rogue even has Smoke Bomb to help secure kills or break line of sight from ranged characters, which when paired with other forms of crowd control from the Rogue and his arena partner, you're going to have some people breaking their keyboards whenever they're facing a good Rogue. So if your main hype for Cataclysm Rogue is PvP, and specifically arenas and solo PvP, Rogue is the perfect class for you. It's one of the best specs in PvP, having S tier comps in 3s and 2s, and it has just about every ability you need to take over an arena match. However, because Rogue has so many cooldowns, it is one of the most difficult classes to play at a high level. You'll really have to learn the ebb and flow of arena matches to know when to kite and when to play aggressive, when to use your cooldowns against certain comps to counter their cooldowns, and how to coordinate perfect CC chains to secure kills. Overall, it's a very challenging class at the top level, but probably the most rewarding class when you get to that high tier point. And overall, PvP is what Rogue usually does best, and that stays true in Cataclysm for sure, being an S tier PvP class. So overall, how is Rogue and what do I think of it? I think it is overall a very, very solid class in Cataclysm. In PvP, it's S tier in terms of fun and strength. And in PvE, it might not be the best, but it can definitely be A tier in PvE in terms of fun and DPS. So if you want to main Rogue, I definitely recommend it. It is really fun, really rewarding, and it can have pop-off moments, definitely in PvP. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for watching. I'm out.